gaming and introducing ourselves as a start. So I'm one of the founders of Redwood. Around since 2003, and this is the second of our webinar series that we are holding this year. We're very excited about it, very excited about the turnout, and would welcome you all to ask questions as we go, or if you want to hold your questions till the end, whatever you prefer. We'll do our best to answer you as we're moving through this, and otherwise we'll answer at the end of the presentation. To my co-presenter, Jeremy.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Friedeberg. I am one of the founders of a company called SpongeLab Interactive. We are a learning technology company based here in Toronto, and we specialize in game-based learning and gamified learning experiences. And we'll be talking a little bit more about this. So I can see everyone is rapidly filing into the session. I'll let Lydia sort of take us through the table of contents for today's webinar.
Great. So basically, what we're going to do right now is walk you through the agenda and what we're going to cover. So the first thing is we're going to talk about gamification and what that means. We also presented this at an interactive. Jeremy and I are both on the board of Interactive Ontario, and we presented this at an iLunch, and it was very successful, and we've been asked to repeat the presentation. So we thought it'd be nice to bring it out to all our client base as well. We're going to talk about what we're trying to achieve and what is the value and how do you determine value of the gamification. And that's something I think as most of you are in the corporate world that everyone struggles with is where's my ROI? How do I justify this to the powers that be? And then we're going to discuss why is e-learning in the state that it is right now, and it is in a state of flux. There's a lot of changes, some exciting things happening, and then convincing people who are not doing as exciting things that they should, and here's the return on investment when you do it. So we're going to talk about the motivation of the organization, the cost benefit, and old ways versus new ways. We're going to look at a spectrum of experiences. So we're going to look at, Jeremy's going to talk about education design and how to personalize this for the user and the user experience. We're going to look at outcomes and validation and workflow design. And next is the challenges. What are the costs and what's the perceived value? What am I getting for this? And what's the perceptions to my learner out there and to my managers? And we're going to look at compliance and what is that reward and what does a reward mean and what's the learner's perceived value. And then we'll look at outcomes. So I'd like to now turn it over to Jeremy to start this webinar.
Okay, so just a few housekeeping things before we get started, just for clarification for everyone. We're running this session obviously through Adobe Connect, and you're logging in now. We also set up a parallel session through the learning management system on SpongeLab.com. And the reason for this is we wanted to have resources available to you pre the session and have a place where you can actually engage with the materials during the session. Lydia and I actually wanted to gamify this webinar. So for those of you who are simultaneously logged onto Adobe Connect and on your account on SpongeLab.com, I'm going to just share my screen briefly, and Martin, if you could pass credentials over to me.
Sorry, give me one moment.
So everyone should be able to see my screen right now. And you, if you are logged onto the SpongeLab site, I will just log in here. If you'd like to get access to the resources that Lydia and I will be going through right now, you just click on My Lessons, and you go to Lessons Assigned, and you'll be able to find these lessons here, and you can actually launch them. So you just click on the View button, and it'll open up a presentation viewer. And if you missed all that, just put some text into the dialogue and we can help you through that. But throughout this deck inside of SpongeLab, you will be able to see questions that get asked, and we're awarding points for those questions. And at the end of the webinar, we will select a winner, and we have a number of prizes up for grabs. And we'll come back to that and we'll tally things up. And I think one of the things we want to do is be able to make this webinar a little more playful, but actually come full circle on the assessment and how you can actually reward people and in real time inside a digital platform like this. So I will stop sharing and move back to the Adobe Connect side, but please, you can send messages through Adobe Connect and we can help walk you through things as we go. So what's interesting about the work that we do at Sponge Lab is that we are very focused on the nature of game. And when it comes to learning, there are a lot of parallels between the process of learning and what you may perceive or think of as games, activities that involve with play. But before I get into that, I wanted to just define a couple terms for you so everyone's understanding what I'm talking about. So games, and that word means a lot of different things to different people. And sometimes when I'm actually speaking about this, depending on where I am in the world, in the United Kingdom, for example, when I'm talking to K-12 events, they often say, well, please don't talk about games because of some of the stigmas attached to it. But for us, they're fundamentally an interactive simulation with objectives and challenges. And that, as a definition, when you apply it to a number of different examples, I'll show you in a minute, you'll see some commonalities between things you may not think of as learning and when we talk about how to actually develop good e-learning. The other side of this is a term called gamification. And many of you will think of this word, if you've heard of it, as points and badges and rewards and things that have come out of the computer gaming world. But for our perspective, gamification is about motivation and behavior change. It's why do people care? Why do people do anything? And it's a really important consideration when looking at the outcomes in developing e-learning, that knowing the perceived value in the people who are going to be using your resources is critically important. So much of the work that we do spans development of digital learning from K-12 all the way up to professional learning communities, and we often have a specialization in the healthcare and medical communities. But generally, the interesting that the process and the problems are similar across all those verticals. But when we sit down with the clients we work with and we talk about what are we doing, like what is the purpose of this e-learning that we're created, we're very focused on outcomes. And as a great example of what is the purpose of going to school, and often it's a really difficult question to answer. And so I have a couple of examples, and we're going to loop back to this, but it's a really interesting question to ask at the beginning of any development project of any kind of learning, is what are you trying to achieve? So I put this in an example. This, for many people, is chess, and they think of it as a recreational game. But believe it or not, this is a 6,000-year-old educational game. The purpose of this game is to train military strategy. And if you think about it, this is probably one of the earliest forms of a learning course. And the perceived outcomes and problems are really quite important. If you are in charge of an army and someone is you're hiring your generals to lead your army, and you want to be sure that they're going to be successful, is there a way you can figure out whether or not someone will be a good military strategist without actually giving them a military to try out? And chess was a game to do that. Can you sit down across your opponent? Can you look them in the eye and defeat them using a structured mechanic like chess? And it is an educational game, and there's a lot to learn from the way that methodology has evolved over the years. Similarly, this is another game. If we look at it in its very basic structures, there's a lot of learning that goes on here. So the idea of teamwork, collaboration, strategy, critically important. the motivations in a game like this are rather interesting. And this is what an example I put in simply because when you think about it, why do people play soccer? Well, in the previous game, if you wanted to be the general of the army, you had to play this game, you had to master it. But when you look at a game like soccer, why do people do this? And most often I get responses like, well, it's fun. I like to play soccer. It's good physical activity. There are other things that come out, like self-mastery. I'm really good at this, and that feels good. That's very important. Other motivators that come out of this are things like, well, you know what? I can get paid a lot of money to play this game. That's an important motivator. And so it's important to look at within the structure, what is actually driving motivation? What do people care about when you're asking them to engage? And generally, people who play soccer, you don't have to force them to do it. They do it on their own because it's tailored to things that are very important to them. This is another example I put in terms of a learning experience. And we do applications similar to this, not for pilot training, but for training nurses and doctors. But in a game like this is a flight simulator. And what's really interesting about this example is the nature of pilot training. And when you look at the stakeholders in a learning environment like becoming a pilot, there are people who want to become a pilot. I want to be a pilot, and I like to fly planes. It's a very good living. That's what I want to do, and I got to go through this structure to actually achieve that license. The other side of this is the people whose responsibility to give out those licenses. What keeps them up at night is, well, I want to be sure that the person I'm giving that license to is going to be able to solve problems in pretty tricky situations. Can I figure that out before I actually give them a license? So that motivation is where the idea of the flight simulator game came from. Now, in a 4-year pilot training program, this is not the only thing you do. You can't teach someone to be a pilot simply in this type of an approach, but it's an integrated component to the rest of the learning structure. So you still are taking exams, you are going to lectures, you are flying in real planes, you're learning how policies and procedures work. But what Flight Simulator does is it gets at the heart of understanding critical thinking, problem-solving abilities, and the consistency over time and the mastery of those skills. This application can tell those instructors, yeah, they are consistently solving complex problems and they're doing it again and again. It's what we refer to as temporal-based assessment. And you can actually, it turns out how a mind performs in a game like this is directly related to how the mind performs in the real world. Critically important. The other side of this is this type of environment opens up a modality of teaching and learning that you can't do any other way. Well, you crashed the plane. Fabulous. You learned what you did wrong, but you're able to walk away from it. That is a really powerful experience to have. And many professional communities, when they're developing learning, they understand the value of failure, especially in the entrepreneurial world, that there's great learning, but you just have to have the support to be able to come back from it. And that's something that the K-12 system is just beginning to understand and figure out how to work into it. So when it comes to these, there is many different things you can do in the digital learning space, and it really spans from what you're familiar with in terms of the slides, next, and take a quiz, all the way to the other end of the spectrum of these rich immersive temporal-based data-driven approaches. But ultimately, what drives whether or not you do this is value. And really, the value is really the outcome that can be achieved minus the effort of delivery. And that's always something when we're working with clients, we're balancing those two elements to come to a value that is appropriate for the organization. It gets them what they want. Whether it's just, I want to make sure everyone passes the onboarding quiz, to I really want them to collaborate and solve problems. And that's really at the core of how we approach good e-learning design.
So in terms of what's the situation, we like to say a lot of people who do e-learning fall into two sort of buckets for the most part. And one is what we call the checkbox kickers. And those are the ones who do the, as Jeremy was saying, the next. And that's what we call successfully boring people since 1992. And are people really learning from that? And is there an ROI to that? Those are things we look at, but there are people who, for compliance reasons, for budgetary reasons, whatever, will say, okay, this is all I need. I just want my people to have this, so I have that checkbox checked and I'm good to go. We're really looking at today about changing the game. We're really looking at a whole approach to learning, which is more of a embracing the situation and getting people involved. And those are the ones who really, those buckets are the people who really do want to influence, affect, and change behavior. And that's what we're going to talk about today. That's really what we want to focus on. There is a whole bunch of different rules that we think that make effective e-learning in gamification. And the first is really keep it simple. In terms of get your message to be clear, to be simple. You can have complex little interactions that they have, but make sure your message is there so that your audience understands it, and it's simple is important. The next thing that we call what was our little sort of area of expertise is keep it snackable. People don't want to sit for an hour-long session. You can have an hour-long's worth of learning, but keep the different sections and topics snackable. That's a big snack for that little boy, but everyone has a different interpretation of snackable. But in terms of, enjoy those bites of information, because look at your demographics today. That's really how they learn. They want to know, and they want to get to the point of, what do I need to know about this specific thing? And don't tell me everything else. I don't need that. I just need this. And let's keep it focused on learning. Number 3 is seamless. When you do have different things, like sometimes there's a game, there's PDFs to download, there's a whole bunch of different things that are part of the program. And to make it a success, design it so it's simple, so people aren't moving around all over the place and not really understanding. And I have to say, I'm sorry this morning with having 2 different links for you to register on. Maybe it wasn't as seamless as we had hoped, but it is something that we should look at in learning, is keep it seamless. It's very important that you do that. The other thing is safety. People worry about safety in terms of, well, if I do my e-learning and it's downloadable and people can look at it at home, can't other people see it as well? How do you do things in a secure environment so that your proprietary information is still there with your employees, but yet you're giving them the ability to be more mobile with that information? The other thing is, don't be afraid to tell a story. Through the ages, people have always learned through storytelling. It's how history basically is made. It basically is telling stories from generation to generation. And why not do that with learning? It's part of mentoring. It's part of a lot of how we learn. And it's something very concrete and solid that really resonates with learners and brings it home. The final thing, which we think is the most important, is what's the learner experience? And Jeremy will talk about that when we talk about how we develop a program, but the learner experience, who is my learner? And let me talk their language so they understand what I am trying to teach them. What is their experience? So what is the experience from their side? And what are they getting from it that will help get the outcomes that I am trying to get from them? So we're going to now turn it back to Jeremy, who's going to talk about why is learning so boring.
So this is an interesting, it's a very interesting question, and we do a lot of different types of development, and sometimes we're developing programs and platforms for very small targeted groups, like a group of sales representatives within a company, and other times it's very large, where we're developing digital learning approaches for very large communities that are 1 million plus. And through all those engagements, we learn a lot. And I should preface this. I mean, we use games and simulations a lot in our work, simply for a couple of reasons. They are very effective teaching tools for a lot of reasons. But at the other side of it, they are incredible data gathering tools. And the data that you get from them help you understand path process, learning preferences, but also the depth and breadth of people's understanding and what motivates and drives them. So what we found is when we assess current e-learning approaches, there's often a component that's really been missed, and I think this is what ultimately leads to the reason so many e-learning programs are often perceived to be so boring. And I'll come back to the game methodology that there's two major components. There's an animation on that. I don't know if that could move a step forward. Okay. When we look at the content that we're developing, whether this is a traditional e-learning program or a game, there's a component we call the simulation. And this is the part that people are going to be engaging with. This is the component where knowledge is being communicated from one group to another. This is where the learning happens, whether this is a blended approach where we're doing digital and together on site, or whether this is a game and we're getting you to play through scenarios or case studies. That's a simulation. And I think generally people are really good at making that simulation and getting all the information in there and using different vehicles to communicate that information. The part that's often forgotten, and Lydia has already sort of brought this up, is this larger encompassing component, which we call gamification. And really it gets at the heart of why do people care and what do they care about? And so often, we look at, well, we're going to have our 3-day sales retreat and we're going to communicate all this stuff over 3 days. But you ask the fundamental question: does anybody want to go? Like, is this really helpful for them to be there for 3 days, or is it more effective to be able to decouple everything and do it in short bursts, 5 to 10 minutes, when they're commuting in into the work every day? And that's really what the data tells you, is what drives that motivation, and how somebody brand new to a company, or a new to a hospital, or just a new teacher are motivated very differently than somebody who's been doing it for a decade. And understanding what drives those behaviors are going to get the compliance you want to see inside the simulation. And that is a critical component to understand. And one of the really difficult things for people to do is to understand truly what motivates other people. And we have a lot of data, and we actually publish on this, on the nature of the efficacy in digital learning. And it turns out, well, what a lot of people will report is very different than their actual behavior. And that's one of the real benefits for using digital technologies, is that it gets the data to understand your community and what motivates and validates the behavior change you want to see. And this is at the core of all the work that we do. So to make this a little bit more schematic, when we sit down to look at a learning structure, we break it up into this kind of 6-phase approach. And at the heart of this, we start in the red column, the outcomes. What are you trying to achieve? Well, we want people to up their scores on the standardized tests. Well, great, that's pretty straightforward. But if you're looking at, well, I want people to collaborate. I want people to feel good about their learning and want to actually come and engage with the course. Or I really want people to be able to be better at solving this type of personnel problem. Defining those outcomes set the whole process in motion. Once we have that red column in place, we go back, and what we do is create what we call the educational design, the methodology to actually communicate and assess. And we blend that with what we call is the technical design. It's how are they going to be doing this? What kind of bandwidth do they have? What type of devices are they on? And the two of those, once completed, we go into deployment. But the digital systems, and I think this is where groups like Redwood and SpongeBob have really been pioneers, is the data gathering through the digital systems give you the real-time validation. Is it working? Are we achieving the outcomes that we expect? And if not, how do we fix it? And there's an iterative approach that's ongoing. And that's one of the really nice things about this, is you don't build it, deploy it, and it's done. You're constantly evolving it. So you're getting exactly what you need. And those outcomes are for the benefit of the organization, but also for the benefit of the learner. And it's really at the core of what we do. And when we come back to those original examples that I put up at the beginning, each one of these successfully are dealing with those outcomes. And depending on who you are and what you're doing, those outcomes have to be met. And if they're not, nobody's going to want to play chess. No one's going to play soccer. And you know what? I'm not going to succeed in this digital training program to become more powerful. These are really at the core of what we do. Just to highlight this, and if anyone's curious, we have games, and this is an example of a game for a high school level audience. This one's called The History of Biology. It is an elaborate storyline. It's kind of like the Da Vinci Code of science, and it's a web-based scavenger hunt, and you have to solve this elaborate problems to this elaborate story. Very successful. This game has hundreds of thousands of players worldwide. But from a structure, what's really interesting about it is that it actually gets at the heart of assessing and training problem solving and collaboration among students. And the data reports that come through here are actually quite incredible. And many of the groups who actually use this in education, even in the K-12 space, they're trying to get at something a little bit deeper. This idea of innovation. And we hear this all the time from our governments. We need to innovate, and we need minds that are going to be able to innovate. And when I look at this as a very simplified equation, in order to get minds to innovate, you need to be able to think critically, and games can help with that. You need to be able to be creative, and you have to have the right environment to be creative, and these type of environments can really assist with that. And the third one there, which is really interesting, is the courage to take a chance. And that's the core idea of it's okay to make a mistake. It's you have the freedom to fail. And all those things in place, you start to get this idea of innovation. And this is what these digital systems really do well. It allows for these types of methodologies to work and to be validated.
Great. So basically, innovation is really what it takes to free your learning, and that's what it's a commitment on many sides. And the most successful programs that we run is when the commitment from the real senior people is there, and it trickles down. That's where you get a full commitment to the company to say, I'm going with this approach, and it's going to work for me, and it will, because you freed your thinking and freed your learning. I mean, we often get from clients, people say, I want to be completely paperless, and I want this to be mobile, and I want this to be this, and they're all wonderful. And when we sit with them and start doing a needs analysis, it's like, well, what tools are you giving your employees in order for them to do this? And they're not. They're saying, we're about to upgrade to IE8. Well, that's a bit of a problem. So, so those are things that we need to sort of all take into consideration when designing, and to be effective, you do need that company, that corporate support. I'm going to show you a quick game. This is a template that basically was designed so it can be populated with your own questions, but it's just a quick idea of ways to test, ways to do an assessment that are more fun than just checkbox kind of technology. So we'll just run through about a 30-second, 1-minute demo here. This game was called Triviarity, kind of a Jeopardy game. And I'm not hearing audio. Oh, okay, sorry. Those are your categories. So just a quick idea, fun game. It's something that's a little more memorable, a little more fun to do than just answering a multiple choice question. You get to take a chance, you get to be innovative, you get to say, okay, I'm going to put 400 points on this because I'm so confident about this answer. And different ways you can do it in an organization. You can play on your own. You can play against your peers, against your region. So there's a whole bunch of different ways. I see somebody here didn't hear the game audio. We're going to be sending, for anyone who's interested, send us an email, and we'll be sending you a recording of this, and the audio will be on it. I'm not sure why you're not getting it, but you can get it through the recording. Another program I want to show, and I'm really happy to see that we collaborated with Gel Communications on this, and Jim is on the line, which is great. And we have actually entered this for an award at IPL, and we do know that we are a finalist. We just found out. And this was done for an organization that really took learning seriously in terms of really wanting to make a change. And we did what we call learning by walking around, which is something that will be featured actually at IPL. I'll be speaking about that. But the organization committed to giving it's a retail organization, and they committed to giving everyone in the organization an iPad, but not everyone in the organization, sorry, every store in the organization an iPad, and they wanted employees to walk around the retail store, touch, feel product, understand it, understand how it works. We had a whole series of modules that were produced, and the longest was 15 minutes, but the average was a 5-minute module on the different products, the different sections of the organization. And then we tested them with what we called Codemaster. One of the things they do, and I'll tell you it's Gulf Farm, but one of the things they do is they don't want clients writing down bin numbers. They want their employees to know pretty much all the main product anyway. So we created this game for them to go through so that it would help them remember the main products by making it more challenging and more fun as you went through it. So we'll show you a minute of that now.
Left.
So you see your progress as you go through the game. You can call a helpline. If you're not sure, you'll get less points, but you can still get the right answer. And we made the game more challenging as you went through it and went through different steps. The assessment was incredibly successful, and we even have people saying to us, I notice when I walk into their stores now how great their employees are, how knowledgeable. And our client has told us since they've done this training, they're having less turnover and higher sales. Couldn't ask for more as an employer, so they're all very positive things. But again, we understood our demographic, and we designed to encourage that demographic so we could change behavior. So just ideas and the challenges of doing it right. And again, you want to work with whoever your vendor is, whether it's us, someone else, but you want to make sure you work together as, if something's not working, is it too difficult maybe? Have we sort of made it too complicated for them? Or if everyone's getting 100%, is it now too easy? How do you raise the bar? So you work together and have this living, breathing tool that is useful for everybody.
Sorry, some people are saying they can't hear the audio. I'm going to turn it off and on again for a second to be sure everybody can hear.
Okay, let's see if this is any better. It was stuttering. Oh dear, I hope I wasn't. Alrighty, I will turn it now back to Jeremy.
Okay. So obviously there's a lot that we've sort of put forth in the webinar today, and I think when there's a lot of amazing things that you can do, but there's a couple of things that come down to actually making this happen. And of course, one is cost. And cost is always a tricky one. And many clients, we talk about the nature of interactive development and platform interactives inside a platform and data analytics and a variety of these other things, and what does it cost, and well, it ranges, and it can be very expensive. So cost is something that always takes into consideration, but there's also many different ways to do things in different technologies, and this is something that needs to be explored at the outset of again, value and how much you're willing to put in to get at that value. So it is a barrier, and games specifically and simulations can be very expensive to develop. Fortunately, there are ways to actually streamline those production costs, and there are engines, there are editors, and a lot of really great digital technologies to help you create interactive content very quickly and at a much lower cost. And that, so there are tools available, and don't think that it is out of reach today, because you'd be surprised at how in reach it is. You were going to mention talk about the perceived value.
Oh, so in terms of the perceived value, is what is your learner getting out of this? And I know sometimes we get the, well, I don't want this to look too expensive because we're sort of a lean organization, and learning gaming does not have to be expensive. It is more expensive than page turner, yes, but it does not have to be over the top with full animation. You can do some nice, simple graphics and nice, really sort of structured games that are fun and easy and memorable and retainable, and you don't have to spend a lot of money, but the experience is still there, and that's what you really want, is the actual the learner experience. It really boils down to that.
So the third one, I think it's really a very important problem that goes on, is this nature of compliance, and often people have a really difficult time getting people to change their behaviors, and compliance in digital technologies is probably one of the biggest problems that people face. And we built this whole system and nobody's using it, and that's it gets at the heart of some of the things I was talking about earlier, is that you have to understand what people care about and what drives and motivates them, and that perceived value, that learner's perceived value, is at the heart of one of the outcomes. And I think I just want to stress this point, that many organizations, they take the organization's outcomes as first and foremost. But if you haven't taken into consideration what the learner's, the value in the learner's outcomes, you're going to have a difficult time with compliance. The good thing is that the use of these digital technologies, you're going to get access to the information to help make appropriate decisions about what those motivations, those boards are. The compliance is everything, and you can do that now, and these systems can really help with that.
Great. Yeah, so measurement again is key, and that's something that everyone wants and everyone asks for. And with gaming, it's really it is a simpler thing to do. You can see how people score, where they've been, how long it took to get them there. So it's all in the design and what matrix you want out of the program that you're developing. So we're wrapping up our presentation. We have asked, some of you have logged into the Sponge Lab site to answer a few questions, and which was part of sort of our game as we went through, and we are giving out 3 prizes. So Jeremy is calculating the winners.
So I wish I could show you this. It's really interesting. So I've actually been pulling up the data reports from the learning management system in real time. And it's really interesting. So over half the class, so almost 80% of everyone in this webinar has been engaging and looking at the resources online. Half the people in this webinar have actually been submitting responses to our pop culture questions that have been secretly scattered throughout the presentation. And they've been scoring. So the system's been tabulating those scores in real time. and we have I have identified three winners of prizes who will be notified after the webinar on their prize, and Lydia will ensure that you get that. So honestly, in third place is Patricia Clark. You did very well. So well done. And in second place was Elaine LaChapelle. And in first place, who kind of blew it out of the water, well done, was Anne Kazatz. So well done, congratulations. It's really great to see that kind of participation in the platform. And I think although we had a short time, we wanted to at least give you a sense of the digital tools that you can use and how you can iterate this full circle, this closed loop type of reward systems in and around a digital learning approach in real time.
Great, thank you everyone for participating. You see both our emails are there, so do feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And so it's Lydia Sani at redwoodperforms.com or Jeremy Friedberg at spongelab.com. So